Hi, I'm Kelly Snyder with Living Perfectly Love Ministries, and I'm here today to do a video devotional with you, something that's been on my heart to share. So one thing I was thinking about the other day was when anxiety comes on. Typically it starts first with a thought or an emotional trigger, and it's enough to be a huge distraction. It keeps us thinking about that thought or what has upset us and gets us to focus on it. And what happens when we focus on it is it tends to grow in our mind. And as a result, anxiety is produced and it continues to grow the more we think about it. So if you've ever heard the saying, don't tell your God how big your fear is, tell your fear how big your God is. So the story I want to share with you is from Matthew chapter 14. It's when Jesus walks on the water. I'm going to read it to you. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Okay, so I want to talk to you about this passage a little bit more. So first, we see that Jesus tells the disciples to get into the boat and go on ahead of him. So the disciples are not with Jesus, or Jesus is not with them in the boat as they're out in the lake. And what happens is they start facing some trouble, right? Some opposition, the wind and the waves. Well, when they could not see Jesus anymore and all they could see was the wind and the waves, they became overwhelmed by their situation, by the opposition they were facing. And how often is that like us when we're facing opposition or trouble, or we see fearful things happening all around us, which is so true in this season of COVID we're facing. We see what's happening on the news and in our social media feeds, and we see what's happened to our children in the schools and not getting to be in person at school right now. We see all the rioting and cities burning down, and there's so much to pull our minds in all kinds of directions and make us feel anxious and afraid, right? So the thing is let's think about Peter now. So when Peter starts walking out to Jesus on the lake, as long as he is fixed on Jesus, his eyes fixed on Jesus, his mind focused on him, he is not afraid. He is at peace, and he's able to walk on the water nonetheless. Okay, but what happens when he notices the wind and then the waves? He begins to sink, right? And that's because he's no longer focused on God, he's focused on his fear. And so what happens is when we focus on our fears, those things that cause anxiety, those things grow in our mind, and suddenly they become bigger than God. God is no longer in the picture. Have you ever noticed that when you are anxious or afraid, God is not in your mind at all? He's not in the picture, right? You don't even see him there. That's because you've pushed him out of your mind, right? So in order to stay at peace, we need to keep Jesus at the center. We need to keep him front and center in our minds and just focused on him, okay? So there's a verse in Isaiah 26:3. It says, "You will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you." That's what we're talking about here, right? That we need to keep our minds, our eyes fixed on Jesus, and we will maintain our peace. We will not be overcome by anxiety and fear.